Thanks, team. That was great. Okay, moving right along, we have a panel on next generation protocols balancing privacy, performance, and interoperability. On this panel will be Robert Hirsch, who's a co-founder and CEO of Zkalyx, Helen Sharron, the CTO of Selfient, Andrew Stone, the lead developer with Nexa, Will Waltrip, the director of product management with AvaCloud, and this panel will be led by Sergey Kusnetdinov, who is the managing director of Gain Ventures. Please join me in welcoming them to the stage.
You want to sit here? You want to be in the middle?
That's okay. Andrew. Yeah, nice to meet you, Andrew. Hey, Sergey.
Testing. Hello?
Does this work?
That's an old picture.
You talking about mine?
No, mine.
Is the mic on? Yeah.
Yes, everything is on. Hello and welcome to the next generation protocol panel. And today we have a really star panel representing all the different debates on what the next generation should be. And I was really excited when we were preparing for this panel, and I realized we need one more voice to make it super provocative and maybe even so dynamic that we would never leave this place and we'll just debate till the end of the blockchain week. And that's Robert, one of my portfolio companies. And yeah, we have Helen with 30 years in banking experience. We have Andrew from UMass. He's a professor there and early developer on the blockchain protocol, and Will from AvaLabs that made really great projects recently with the institution. But before we dive into it, like next generation protocol, what's wrong with the previous generation, right? Why do we need the next generation? So Helen, would you take us on a little history ride about the history of protocols?
Sure, I'd be happy to do that. You said 30 years, right? 30 years in financial technologies, which is true. So I started at State Street Bank, just up the road, 30 years ago, and was working with our clients, bringing trades onto the accounting system at State Street, and trying to get them to adopt standards called ZITC or SWIFT standards. Fast forward to my most recent part of my journey, which was at Bank of New York Mellon, and I was doing the same thing. I was taking in Excel spreadsheets and trying to get them into our accounting system. And you take a look at an adoption across something like that, and you wonder, well, can we possibly do that better? And the answer to that is yes. If I could talk a little bit about the interoperability and the history of that as well.
We'll have questions about that, but
Okay.
yeah, you can mention a little bit about interoperability.
So that's a little bit of yes. Well, I guess the statement that I just make now is that the reason why we need interoperability at this moment is because blockchains are multiplying. And when it was just Bitcoin, we didn't need it. So, all right, thank you.
All right, so a follow-up question. Andrew, you were at the center of Bitcoin scaling problem. Can you say what did the early protocols get right and what did they get wrong?
I think it's a very interesting question because if you look at the history of Bitcoin, little tighter, okay. If you look at the early history of Bitcoin, the originator Satoshi had like this huge vision, and there were a lot of security flaws and exploits, none of which in that early times were really taken advantage of, but the end result was like a clamping down of the protocol. And then, of course, Ethereum came and said, no, we're going to realize this sort of smart contract vision that Satoshi had kind of hinted at, right? And then Ethereum has its own problems. And so I've created, for example, another blockchain, which is more along the Satoshi side, but it tries to expand the protocol in what we might imagine, Satoshi would have done, UTXO set style.
Okay, so Robert, if we talk beyond tech, what are the other issues that you see the evolution from earlier generations to the current generations?
Sure. Unfortunately, I'd like to talk about the tech. However, for you, I'll talk about other stuff. And I think you started it, really. So as soon as we had the second blockchain, like that moment, as soon as it became enough popular, the very first thing people wanted to do was move from Bitcoin into Ethereum. And all of a sudden, we needed a way to do that. Forget the tech. There had to be a way. Beyond that, especially in America, regulatory clarity didn't exist. I'm not a big fan of regulations in general, but clarity I'm a fan of. So if you're going to say we're not going to regulate it, then be clear on that. Or if you're going to regulate it, then be clear on that. So that made it so that crypto companies had to do weird things like Cayman Island companies and foundations and all that kind of stuff, making it kind of like we're dragging our feet in the mud when all we wanted to do was develop cool stuff. So regulatory clarity, not a particular regulation is good, but we missed out on, 10 years of clarity that we could have had. And then I think the last thing really was we're a little bit naive as an industry on how to deliver the vision that we had. So bridging all these different protocols together, we put a Band-Aid there, and they're called bridges. We said, okay, we're going to make it simple through front-end stuff, and that's not enough. And so we need to find a way to kind of get more stitching together of everything so that we can actually achieve the ease of use and liquidity and revenue sharing that we all want to actually have out of this industry.
All right, that's an interesting thought. So Helen, back to you. You advocate that interoperability is more important than privacy. Why does interoperability will unlock the gates and get more users and institutions on board rather than privacy?
Interoperability and bridging, as Robert was saying, is a thorn in the side of blockchain adoption right now. We saw with the bridges coming as a first round of interoperability past the custodial banks, we saw financial losses. In 2023, $1 billion of financial losses, which is 0.2% of all the transactions going across the blockchain. And that's much too big for us to be able to gain adoption, and so there's a real fear there. So for us to solve that problem and go into the next phases of it, where blockchains are actually talking to each other with protocol layers and moving past bridges, is going to be extremely important. I mean, privacy is important as well, and I'm sure we'll talk about it, but if we don't solve this, we won't get the adoption that we're looking for.
Can I add a stat on that?
Yeah, I think you solved the same problem, but from the different angle. So
Yeah.
go ahead.
So like 100%, what you just said is all right. But I think how bad it is wasn't communicated well. $82 billion lost in bridges and exploits. The fact that we need custody as a solution to do things. Every single place in our industry where we have to trust something or someone is an attack vector. And true interoperability, like where everything is trustless from one end to another, helps resolve that leak of funds that's going to state actors that we don't like and all that kind of stuff. So yes, we need rock solid interoperability, smooth interoperability, such that like right now we're doing a new bridge, and it's a great bridge or whatever, but the future can't be more bridges. Every time we're at 100 bridges now, somebody comes up with a new bridge. Now it's 101 bridges. Like, it's not solving our problem. The problem has to be smooth interoperability from one chain to another, and then we can actually have, well, that's part of the solution for an industry that people can use and not be afraid of.
Yeah. And I know those two can talk hours and hours about those issues, as we've seen yesterday during the dinner. But we have to move on a little bit. So, Will, AvaLabs had a project with JP Morgan recently. Can you talk a little bit about it, why it's important, what it brings to the institutional adoption sphere?
Yeah, so,
Really close.
real close. Okay, there we go. Yeah, so that project was an interesting one. It was part of Connexus Project Epic. And so the key theme with that project was, how do we bring tokenized funds to the blockchain, right? The primary thesis being by having these assets on chain, enabling some privacy enhancing technologies, it would help to increase price discovery, increase adoption, increase revenue and inclusion, particularly on secondary markets. So the interesting part here is, we talk about interoperability, we talk about privacy. For this project, it kind of included a little bit of all of that stuff, right? So it proved out, hey, we can have a chain that just serves a specific purpose, which was for DID. And so we had this chain that ran on one side that provided DID. We had a chain that was public, but still had a privacy-preserving protocol that allowed for private fund tokenization, and then user inclusion was verified based on the DID protocol that was implemented. So all of this happened across multiple chains. All of this happened with a trustless validator set. So all of these sort of components, and it starts to prove out, hey, you need a little bit of all of these different protocols for this adoption, for some of these goals to become realized.
Okay, lots of technical terms. Can you explain in a simple terms what is ERC encrypted ERC encrypted tokens are?
Yeah, so another product that we released earlier this year was an encrypted ERC. So an ERC token is kind of the de facto standard. There's a ERC20 token, an ERC721, an ERC1155, and then there's a whole variety of other token standards out there. This token standard that we released helped to support confidential payments. And by confidentiality, I mean obfuscation of transaction balances and transaction amounts. So you may say, hey, well, this is available on other privacy-preserving chains like Monero or with Zcash or things like this. The key thing here that we see is AvaCloud and AvaLabs. We work with a lot of institutions and enterprises, and a key component that we saw is, one, it needs to be lightweight. It needs to be deployable on any EVM chain, so it can be easily adopted, and protocols can kind of consider this and figure out how do we incorporate this into our stack. And then two, it needs to be auditable to maintain compliance, right? Because I think whether or not we like regulations and all these sort of components, it is the world that we live in, and figuring out the right balance of private, public, and then auditability becomes pretty critical towards adoption, beyond just the degens out there.
Yeah. Andrew, your approach with partial transactions take a different take on the problem. So how does it improve privacy or decentralization compared to today's EVM model?
Can I back up for 1 second? I'd just like to say something about the difficulty of interoperability.
Sure.
Okay. And basically, something that everyone should think about is it's not an easy problem, right? Because, see, the security model of all these different fundamental blockchains can be very different. So you might wish that you could just easily move funds from one blockchain to another, but what you're actually doing is changing the fundamental security model that is holding your coins, right? And such a thing, especially to happen automatically, like transforming, okay, if I look at data from a separate chain and I pull it into my chain, right? What if that other chain doesn't have finality yet, so the data just magically changes, but I have finality, right? So this becomes a very difficult problem.
Can you break it down in simple terms? Like if I move my money from
Okay.
one chain to
How about
another?
this? How about this? It's like you ship something via like FedEx, you know, and then lo and behold, you know, someone shows up at your destination with like, you know, a golf cart, and it just kind of dragged behind your, you know, on a, you know, just like it's just attached via a rope being dragged behind the car, right? And you're like, wait a second, I signed up for quality, right? But what I got was, you know, or maybe they just open up all the packages, right? And then, oh, maybe grab something, put it back.
Okay, so if I'm
It's a
shipping,
simple example.
if I'm shipping something overseas and I have FedEx, and the last mile would be some local partner with very different protocols.
Exactly.
So my package would be safe until it goes to another carrier who might lose my packet.
Right, but you say, oh no, but when I shipped with FedEx, FedEx gave me certain guarantees, right? So there's your problem. But anyway, so what partial transactions does is it allows you to sort of make a bid and just throw it out there on any communications channel. And unlike, think of it like a stock bid and then someone accepts that, right? But the difference is after that, in a classic bid accept model, you then have to get together and settle, right? But what we can do with blockchains is have that bid actually contain sufficient information that the taker can accept the bid atomically. They don't have to communicate back to the originator. So this is sort of an advanced protocol that allows, even though blockchains are decentralized, sometimes the smart contracts are settled and handled in a very centralized way. Go to this web page and interact with it, right? But this allows you to just take some data, and that data is in fact a valid offer for an exchange.
All right. Yeah. Very interesting stuff that we're talking. How technical are you guys? Are you developers or like trying to adopt the tech? No. Okay. Okay. So, some of you. So let's shift gears a little bit more to fundamental discussions in the industry. Robert, what privacy levels do regulators actually want? True anonymity or auditable privacy? And how do you design for both?
You keep asking me the government questions. I'm probably the least government supporting person in this room. But let me ask everybody a quick question. How many people have been in blockchain since before 2013? 2. So the reasons we got in are probably not the things that the government are going to be supporting. That's the way I kind of look at that. We got in because of a lot of freedom, a lot of privacy, a lot of things. What we're seeing now, especially with actions in Europe and so forth, there's a lot of dedication to de-anonymizing or having a third-party control over coins so that they can provide the features that government generally provide. And so that's the idea that government is providing security, and so they are putting that into the stable coins that we're seeing. They're putting it into kind of rails around how crypto can work. We're going to see it in RWA also. And so that's the stuff that they do like. There was a time when a number of governments were trying to ban P2P apps, messaging apps, because they can't control the anonymity in there. Ooh, I did it. And so the way they generally want to push is not the same thing that a lot of people like me got into crypto for, because I thought we could kind of create protocols that obviated the need for that. I don't think that happened. So government's now stepping in to sort of make that happen. So they like a lot. They like a lot of activity. They want an economy. It's very clear that they're wanting a crypto economy. We created that for them. But they're also wanting the rails that they've always had to help. They look at it as we can foster a good economy as long as we put up the rails that we can protect. So I think we're going to see. That's what I'm seeing so far. I don't know if you look like.
But
you
how
might
do
have a
how do you
contention
design
to that.
how do you design for both, for anonymity and auditable privacy?
Yeah, so the thing is, I think you can. So for example, the thing you just need to do to make government really happy is you have anonymity. So when I'm transacting with somebody, my transaction with that person should be private. The other person should be able to see in, right? That's private, right? The government would like that we can open that up if we need to. So for example, Midnight's doing that. There's a couple other ones doing that. So it's private until we need it to not be private. And that's kind of like how you can do both and work within government rails.
All right.
What I'm talking about is any communications mechanism is also a way to do an exchange. So I think that might be relatively hard to regulate.
Question to Helen, because I like to ask questions to Robert and Helen, one after another. Where do you see standards and regulations clashing or aligning in the nearest future?
Within the blockchain environment or between Web 2 and Web 3?
Within blockchain environment, but
Okay.
I don't see a lot of difference between Web 2 and Web 3, but you can touch on both points.
Okay, well, the reason I asked that question is I think the blockchain world has an opportunity to really move forward very quickly and far in front of Web 2 and entice people over into this whole arena of the democratization of assets and money, which is hugely important. And I think that's probably the reason why many of us are in this room today. So interoperability becomes extremely important, and creating the standards for that become really important. And everyone who's in the blockchain needs to be thinking about how we communicate really well, really quickly, so that we can offer this opportunity to the world to transact data and get ourselves off of fiat currencies. Taking on those models, figuring out how we can move assets through, protect privacy, as well as transact at the rate of speed that's unseen in the world today is hugely important. So getting those protocols right is really going to matter. And I think as we do our development and as we think about what it is that we're building and how that's going to evolve, we need to keep this in mind, having it always be the elephant in the room is what are we doing today and how are we going to ensure what we do is going to bring this forward for all of us so that we truly are a 100-year technology and we truly do solve some of the problems that are facing the world today.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Robert, back to you. Which one thing in UI UX should disappear so people would not see that they cross on-chain and start being in Web3?
I think other people should also answer this, but for me, I don't in terms of UX and like that feels like a lot of front-end stuff, and I think there's like that's always a problem for any industry and any part. For me, it's really our two friction pain points, which are bridges right now, which I think we can obviate. You're doing clearly work there. I think everybody appears doing work there. Avalanche is also kind of in that ecosystem, is very much like that. So for me, it's really eliminating the needs for bridges, and then utility tokens is the other one. I honestly believe 2 tokens required to do things is a dumb idea, and it's very confusing. It provides a lot of friction of when we want to move things or move assets from one chain to another. You got your token to do the thing here and the fee token. You want to go over there, and it's a token, and another feed coin. Like all of that is that's not natural. Like everybody else on the planet in all the countries are using one form of currency. And so definitely tokens, like definitely meme coins, definitely RWA, definitely tokens is a valuable technology, but requiring a token to be able to do an economic transaction, a second token, that's kind of silly. And I think those two things need to go away.
Okay, thank you. Will, the same question, but from the institutional perspective. Which improvements should be in UX for institutions so they will adopt blockchain tomorrow?
If it's about institutional adoption, I think it comes around how are you securing the network? What are the controls in place? Like we spend a lot of time talking with projects around, what does your validator set look like? Who's able to deploy contracts? Who can see the data within those contracts? And I think those are not necessarily like UX, because I think UX tends to be more on the front end side of things, but I think those are the considerations around adoption that we spend a lot of time talking about. And I think also when you start to talk about this kind of like problem space, it's what is the right problem to solve, right? And I think this is where when you have too many tokens or too many options for users, like you have to kind of question what is the problem that we're solving. We talk with people who are issuing stable coins, and it's like, well, do we need another USD denominated stablecoin, to serve some market in the US where really digitized fiat is already prevalent with like FedNow and the clearinghouse's RTP network, versus it solves like critical problems, in underdeveloped countries, right? And I think that's where you have to also think about what is the problem that we're targeting.
Rapid fire question, 30 seconds to answer. Andrew, what is the most important protocol innovation that you will see in the next 2 years? And same question for everyone.
Go.
I would guess some sort of quantum-resistant encryption. That's NIST is currently working on certifying certain, and I think that would add a lot of confidence in the future of blockchain and blockchains adopting these quantum-resistant techniques.
Quantum resistant? Will?
Yeah, I mean, I think we spend a lot of time talking about privacy and kind of how to make that more flexible. So I think that's a big topic for us.
Robert?
I'm super biased. So I think our technology that allows layer 1 blockchains to talk together without bridges is important for this entire industry. And I also agree with quantum security, but I think we have solutions now that blockchains need to deploy. So yes on that one too.
Helen?
Let's just make everything that we do interoperable and keep it in the forefront of our minds.
Yeah. We talked for 30 minutes about the tech, but the technology adoption requires trust, interoperability, and real use cases. So whatever we're talking right now makes sense if there is a real demand for that from institutions, from retail users, and we'll hope to see the panelists next year to kind of refresh their forecasts and see where we are in 1 year. Please join me in applauding our panel participants today.